Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, we already looked at the worst cards released this year, as well as the best cards in the respective grade. But today I want to smash those best cards in the respective grades together in one video and talk about the best cards released this year in its entirety, no matter what type of card, clan, or grade, or archetype. Now that said, to prevent this video to be just a repeat of those 3 specific videos and just mash them all together, I want to spice things up a little bit and put some extra restrictions on the list itself. Because if I didn't do that, basically this video would almost be 1-for-1 the same as the best grade 3s with some strides mixed into it, as those cards basically defined the entirety of this year. So to prevent that, I'm going to try to incorporate many different clans as well as different grades in the mix, so we have a good diversity of grade 1s, grade 2s, grade 3s, grade 4s, as well as the representation of different clans in this list. So with it explained, let's jump straight into the list itself, and we're gonna kick things off with a kicker, because for the number 10 spot, we have Ambush Demon Stealth Beast Nue Dio. And the fact that this is number 10 would already basically signal you how insane the other 9 cards or spots are going to be, because Nue Dio is an incredibly powerful stride that was released in Premium Collection 2020. And depending on which stance you are, this could be argued to be the strongest stride from the set, because it enabled Murakumo to not only superior stride on their opponent while they're still at a low grade because of the interaction it has with Yuga, but it could also allow the clan and this card to come in multi-attacking with at least 6 rearguard swings as well as the Vanguard swing itself. So you have 7 attacks while your opponent is still at grade 2, and you accelerate your GB count while also putting up the pressure quite heavily right at the get-go. And anybody that plays Premium knows the fact that superior riding as well as superior striding is a pretty powerful mechanic that allows clans to exceed over the rest. Like, that's the main reason why Ezel was as broken as it was for the longest run, because they had superior ride as well as a superior stride mechanic to their namesake. So now you might think, how are we supposed to overcome Nue Dio? Well, we can already look at the number 9 spot, because for the number 9 spot, this might surprise you a bit. We've got Black-clad top deity, but black. And this is quite odd, because this card wasn't even in the top 10 list of the best grade 3s, let alone being in the top 10 of all the best cards this year. Now the reason why I want to include this card in the list is to not only allow DP to also have a spot in this list, but it is a card that really defined the clan in 2020. Yes, we had the debacle of Grand Gallop, but most DP players saw and searched out Black as the actual VR of the set. And for obvious reasons, this card basically fills a spot that was lacking in DP's in Dimension Police arsenal, because it allows the clan to have access to a generic superior ride mechanic, as this card can superior ride in any unit, which opens up the floodgate for some insane synergies, but it also gives Dimension Police an play when they went second and it's their first grade 3 turn. Most of their cards are offline until the second grade 3 turn if they went second. Now thanks to Black, they no longer have to wait that additional turn even if they went second, because now they can come swinging out of the gates on their very first grade 3 turn, which gives Dimension Police at least some plays during the early stages of the game. And the fact that it's so generic means that it can only become better with more support on the horizon for Dimension Police. Now for the number 8 spot, we go back to Premium, as we've got the new grade 1 order card, Tempest Sphere. And I already explained why this card is so good in the grade 1 video, and to reiterate this a little bit, it basically allows any clan and any deck and any player to gain access to their GB skills in the early game, which opens up the floodgate for some insane shenanigan plays and combo potential that would otherwise be impossible. And we've seen all the crazy interactions that already been done with Zazen, which can also be done with Tempest Sphere to some extent, only now it's behind the counterblast cost, but it still doesn't defeat the purpose of this card, as it's a really good deterrent of early game aggression, because if you give your opponent that single counterblast, they might activate the Tempest Sphere and unleash mayhem on you even before your turn to play or whatever you wanted to do in the early game. So Tempest Sphere is a card that really defined the format and is therefore warranted number 8 spot on the best cards released this year. Now for number 7, we've got one where I'm personally very happy about, and that is Chrono Jet Dragon. And you might think to yourself, how in God's name is this card so good? Well, it might not be directly on par with a lot of cards with just outright power output, but Chrono Jet Dragon changed a lot for the clan. This card is a generic guard restrict unit. It allows Gear Chronicle to gain access to not only a superior ride mechanic card like Lost Legend and Chrono Fang, but it's also a rearguard unit which gives you a guard restrict, which is the good one as it's the Sentinel guard restrict. And being in a forest clan allows you to stack up on a lot of power, which can generate a scenario where your opponent cannot block the attack. And in combination with next stage being able to rewrite back into it, opens up a lot of shenanigan plays. And this then also translates well in premium, because we have a lot of cards that can either time leap into it for multi-tech combos on the rearguard circle. We have Crossover Dragon, which is more of a meme, but we also have the newest right from the premium collection with Croc Rock Dragon, which can go into a next stage, which can go into a Chrono Jet Dragon for more powerful shenanigan plays, with that guard restrict being on every single potential last attack or combo attack, which can result in some very powerful synergies that can overwhelm your opponent's defensives if they do not prepare for such an attack. And the fact that it's a rearguard circle skill means that Chrono Jet Dragon has more future potential, because it can still be utilized as a attack slot in any future deck, especially in standard, because not only does it have a rearguard circle skill, so it can be utilized as a strong beater with a guard restrict, it also has the inherent superior stride mechanic, so it's a good backup unit because you can still go into any grade 4 if you were reliant on something else. So that makes Chrono Jet Dragon a very good staple card for Gear Chronicle for probably a long while. Now, we talked about a lot of high grade cards except for Tempest Sphere, but it's an order card, so let's go to a more lower grade actual unit. As for the number 6 spot, we've got Pirate Swordsman Column Bard. And once again, it's a card that already was featured in our best grade 2 spots, as it was the best grade 2 of this year, and that was for obvious reasons, and that warrants its spot on this list, because there's no way that you talk about the best cards released this year and not talk about Column Bard. It's such a powerful, generic consistency engine for a clan that revolves around the drop zone, and Column Bard is basically one of the perfect cards that Grand Blue could ask for, as it just mills a specific card so it can set up your combo plays, but it can also immediately superior call any card from the drop zone to the field, which can also be a combo piece to a potential combo play, as it allows you to superior call more units during the battle phase, thus increasing the overall multi-attack potential of your deck, which we have seen with the Night Rose engine. So because of that whole generic consistency engine, as well as the potential multi-attack potential on top of the card, makes it a very powerful card, and definitely on the list for the most powerful cards released this year. Now, coming in on the number 5 spot, we've got one of the strongest grade 3s released in the first half of this year, as we've got Majesty Lord Blaster. And yes, that might sound weird to us English speakers, because for the English format this card came way later than for Japan, but in Japan they got this around the time of the Tri-Freeze set, so that's why it's in the first half of this year in that quote. Now, once again, this is a card that made the top 10 list of best grade 3s, and again, that's the reason why it also makes this list, because it's a very powerful Royal Paladin card that has strong offensive capabilities as well as defensive capabilities. Being an Agent K base during the entirety of the game helps you a lot with survivability, while also being very helpful for being powerful in the offensive capabilities. But of course, its main attraction was the fact that you could accelerate those force markers, which meant that even though MLB was restricted behind a free attack force deck, it still could win a lot of games, because those numbers, those free attacks, would swing in with insane column numbers, so not a lot of decks could keep surviving turn after turn, and it will go on for a couple of turns because you could survive long games thanks to that inherent high base power number. And MLB was a card that somewhat warped the meta a little bit, because it was one of the top decks the moment it came out, and it stayed there for quite a while, but it wasn't as meta defining as the following spots on the list, because the top 4 cards were all meta defining and warped the format to their own liking. Because on the number 4 spot, we've got Luard. And I probably don't have to explain why this card is so powerful. Luard could superior stride or superior ride into Drag Driver, which allowed them to accelerate force markers. They had the entire grade 1 toolbox, they had the draw power, they had rearguard retirement, so field control, and the resource engine was unrivaled, non-par, because they could just countercharge the soul charges with their grade 1s, which gave them access to infinite resources as long as they have access to one of them, and that's all they need. And this card basically make every deck and every card pre-VBT10 and even in VBT10 and even in VBT11 mean nothing, because it was Luard or it wasn't Luard. And that basically showcases how powerful this card is. But yet, it's only on number 4. And that tells us that the top 3 are even more insane. And that's pretty logical if we take a look at the number 3 spot itself, because on number 3 we've got Sunrise Ray Knight Gurgit. Everything that I just said with Luart could basically be translated to Gurgit, only now it's even more multi-attacking with maybe a little bit less power, but good enough that defense triggers wouldn't really matter. They could accelerate Excel markers, just like Luart could accelerate force markers, and they have really good resource engine with their counter chargers and soul chargers within the deck itself. The only major difference here is that Luart is slower because Gurgit is much faster than Luart, which outcompeted Luart in its entirety, because the moment that this card came in the meta, it basically made Luart disappear for quite a while on the format, because not a lot of players were actually picking Luart, because everybody was already shifting over to Gurgit, as it was basically a Luart 2.0. And currently, Gurgit is the prominent figure in today's meta and for basically Vanguard 2020. So you might ask yourself, how in God's name is this only number 3? There are 2 cards, 2 spots above it. So what could be on those spots? Well, for number 2, we've got a very surprising one, because I think a lot of people were expecting this to be number 1. But for number 2, we've got Rain Elemental Zarzan. And I probably don't have to explain why this card is much better than Gurgit, much better than Luart, and much better than anything else on this list, because this card literally warped an entire format, because premium was Zarzan or no Zarzan, or you don't play premium at all. And that basically tells you how powerful this card was. Like, the moment this card came out, vanilla decks were the deck to go in premium, no matter what type of clan you were playing. If you didn't play Zarzan, you weren't really playing the game. And it resulted into an entire community movement where we tried to ban the card, and to some extent Bushiroad did listen, as they limit the card to 1, which basically tells you the story of how powerful Zarzan was, because the card was already limited before it came out in the English format, and it just came out for Japan. And I probably don't have to explain even further why this card is so powerful, because the card speaks for itself, and you can go watch all those videos on YouTube of content creators and people explaining their concerns when the card actually was revealed. Now, something that I need to explain is the reason why this card isn't on number 1, because you could say this card is the strongest card released this year, by far above anything else. But there is a card, or should I say a group of cards, that are arguably even better than this, because Zarzan, Gurgit, Luart, and all these boss units come and go to some extent, and they are now prominent, but probably will not be prominent in a year's time from now, and especially seeing as Zarzan just got limited to 1. But that's not the case for the number 1 spot on this list, because for number 1, we've got the Grade 3 Searchers. And yes, you might now think to yourself, wait, how can this be number 1? Because it was number 10 on the grade 1 spot, and Zarzan was number 1 on the grade 1 video. So how is this now suddenly flipped on its head? Well, basically, let me explain you a couple of things. Specifically, in the grade 1 video, I didn't want to put them onto the number 1 spot because there were a group of cards. So I basically put them on number 10, as seen as they weren't one single card. Now, for this particular video, I want to highlight their real potential. And also, I didn't want to put Zarzan on number 1 because fuck Zarzan. But to basically explain why I still think that the Grade 3 Searchers actually deserve this spot on the list and basically are the best cards released this year, it's the fact that they are so generic. Any card in this list, and most of the powerful cards that were released this year, were grade 3s. But these grade 3 Searchers allows you to get consistent access to those cards and basically make any type of deck, archetype, or playstyle much more consistent because you gain access to those grade 3s. But on top of it, they also allow you to have a strong grade 1 booster, as you can easily become 13k boosters. And not every deck or every grade 1 can gain that extra additional power increase without also having such a powerful skill like the consistency engine they have with the grade 3 search effect. So even though a lot of decks and powerful cards are dictated by the actual boss units themselves, these grade 3 searchers will be played probably for years to come, as they are so generic and basically became clan staples for Vanguard as a whole. And with that we basically include the most powerful cards released in 2020. Yes, I took some little liberties with the construction of the list itself, but that said, I do stand by my points that these cards are probably the most impactful and strongest cards released this year, with multiple criteria taken in consideration, by either improving the clan quality of their meta relevancy, or just the inherent consistency engine they provide to the clan or the engines, and just overall power output that the cards provide, like Gurgit or Luard, as well as Zarzan. But that said, I might have overlooked your favorite card or the card that you think are one of the most powerful cards released this year. So let me know in the comments down below what you think are the most powerful cards released in 2020. And you can put any criteria you want to them. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.